So it's the 25th of February, and about a month ago, we posted online a suggestion that if anybody had any questions related to Squash 57 or racquetball, then post them in, and we would try and do like a Q&A, record the answers and post them back online. And we've had a number of responses. So before we go into those questions, I think we should probably introduce ourselves. So my name is Patrick Osborn, and I've been playing racquetball since the early 2000s, through to the glorious day in 2016 when it was renamed to Squash 57. And in about 2018, I became the chair of the World Squash Federation Squash 57 Commission. And for the last 5+ years, I've been helping Mark out with the organization of the stuff that he does. So Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Mark. I started UK-Racketball in 2010 with kind of 5 tournaments across the UK, and that grew to the largest it was in 2019, so just before the pandemic, where we had 10 tournaments in all different corners of the UK. We had a really successful national championships at Edgbaston Priory, national doubles, and inter-counties. So kind of the head of sort of the website for UK-Racketball and that UK-Racketball series and all of the events that go with it in the UK.
Very good. Okay, so the questions that we've had handed in, I'm going to try and read through them, sort of facilitate this session. And if we're looking like we're running on for a long time, I'm going to interject and we'll just have to move on to the next question because we don't want this to go on forever. So we try to group the questions, and starting up, there's a lot of interest about what's going on in the UK. So here we are, we've gone through this, or going through this pandemic, we're getting vaccinated, hopefully very soon. And there's a lot of questions coming through about how we're going to get out of the situation. So Ian Snedden's asking when we're going to be able to organise the next COVID-safe event. Andy Mitchell's asking for the date of the return of the UK events, and Mike Phillips asking about the national. So there's a lot of interest in what's going to be happening in the UK as we get through to the summer and later on in the year. So Mark, what do you think?
Yes, obviously we had Boris's announcement this week. And on the back of that, I've had a lot more kind of WhatsApp messages, emails, and Facebook messages from people obviously desperate to come back to the series, which was, I mean, it is really nice for me to hear. And it's been obviously really good. Sometimes you feel like you're in the wilderness, but, you know, there's a really good community. And the fact that people, you know, have that contact and send me those messages, show me how much they're missing it and how badly they want it all to be back is fantastic. We're going to try and get it back as quick as we possibly can. I think realistically, and me and Patrick work together on this, on kind of building a series and where we think the dates will fit with everything. We're looking at kind of the end of July as the earliest, potentially the start of August for a series event. And then we're hoping to have the Racquetball Nationals towards the end of the summer. We're just working with Edgbaston Priory on that at the moment. But yeah, if everything goes well, end of July, start of August for the first event, Racquetball Nationals in the summer if we can, probably towards the end of that summer. And then, I mean, we're still hoping to potentially even have 5 tournaments in the 2021 calendar, which would be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good. I think we talked about this about 2 weeks ago, and that was before Boris gave his announcements. That's before the vaccine impact had taken its toll on the numbers. And we weren't thinking that we'd get anything done to maybe November or December. So we've almost pulled that in by 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, and I still think we need to be cautious on it, and we need to, you know, see how everything goes. And we know from this that it has been very volatile. It's been up and down, and it's really difficult to predict. So, yeah, it's our aspiration, and we're probably going to see how stuff goes over the next couple of weeks and work with our clubs to put something together. And yeah, at the moment, all the signs are looking really optimistic. And as I say, it's great that kind of contact with the series members, and yeah, to see how badly you all want it to come back. So that's
Yeah,
really
it's
good.
really good. It's really good. I mean, we've been off quite a long time. I know that there are competitions taking place elsewhere, because I'm seeing, I guess, what's going on globally, and there are competitions taking place in Ecuador on a monthly basis. We've just seen South Africa had a team event, like a pairs event, to take place. So things are happening, but in the UK, it's nothing, and maybe nothing till mid-April. So hopefully back on court soon.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. So we had a question about marking, a couple of questions around marking. So Zoe Fennell was asking whether in the events that you run, should the winner of a match do the marking for the next match, or should it be the loser? What do you think?
Yeah, so again, this is something we've discussed before, and we've had quite a few internal discussions about this. So it is one where, for the community out there, just be aware that we are kind of having these, and it's, you know, we don't just put something in stone. There's constant kind of discussion around it. I think for the issue with the refereeing and the marking, UK-Racketball right at the very start, 2010, decided to go down a route of mass participation and community being at the heart of the events, rather than being purely all around kind of achievement and competition. And one of the ways that we tried to do that was to make it so that if you lost your match, then you didn't have to referee, which was very different to kind of a squash graded tournament or a PSA event, where it would always be the loser of the event that would then referee the next match. And the winner almost had that, you know, positive they'd won their match and positive they didn't have to referee. I think by making it the winner who refs, I think it kind of helps to create that community. It shows that kind of everybody at some point in that day should be, you know, refereeing, and that, yeah, everyone's on a level playing field with it. I can see Zoe's point. I think, you know, the kind of discussions that we have is around, should the winner be able to have a chance to stretch, have a chance to get some food intake before their next round. And you can kind of see towards the end of some UK-Racketball events where people don't have a huge gap between matches, and then it makes it more difficult, the fact they're refereeing. But I really like the idea that we have that set rule, and yeah, everybody's in it together. And that even happens at the nationals, and you've got, you know, the very, very top players, people like Mike Harris and Tim Vale, who are going to referee the next match, and it might be any match on that court, and there's no ego with it. It's that's part of racquetball, part of Squash 57, that, you know, everybody's the same.
Yeah, I was in a squash competition probably 3 years ago, and they had the losers marking, and you'd have a bank of very unhappy, no nonsense markers, sort of like a seat of shame.
Yeah, and I think that's right as well. I think it's really nice if you've lost, it means you can just, you know, head straight to the bar, or, you know, do whatever you want. And if you've won, you should go on a bit of a high anyway. Then yeah, you've got to grab that clipboard and you've got to stand there and do your refereeing. But I think with the nature of kind of Squash 57 racquetball, you know, that kind of, you know, exact preparation for a next match isn't the be all and end all. The, you know, community and chatting to people and being around people is the most important thing. And yeah, that's what it tries to promote.
Okay, so Zoe had a follow-up question around the marking, and we have, except for last year, we have an annual nationals, and sometimes, or maybe in the later stages of those, we have official squash markers who are marking, and they don't necessarily mark to the same sort of rules that we mark at the regional or even the club level competitions that we have. So what can we do or to work towards getting a more consistent marker?
Yeah, I think that is definitely an issue. And obviously, you know, racquetball and squash kind of have this subjective refereeing, which is incredibly difficult. So at the moment, we're beginning to kind of explore the options that we've got with Squash 57. And, you know, we want to take a different approach to the squash refereeing. We want it to be, you know, more lenient, and we want to kind of embrace that community feel that we talked about before. kind of in order to do that, I think the rules around the referee needs to be a little bit different. And as Zoe said, like at the the regional events, that is the case. I think at the nationals, the referees do adapt really well, and they are more lenient. But I think probably the problem that we've got is that we don't have this centralized rules. We have this idea that the rules are the squash rules, but they're a bit more lenient, and that probably just creates even more of a subjective look at the rules. So kind of what we're going to try and do is to get together some really simple rules, and then communicate them to the community. Patrick's actually already started to do this with videos where we're kind of taking people's comments on board, and trying to build them almost holistically with the help of everybody. And that's probably going to be a process that takes the next few months. But I suppose our objective is that we're going to have something in place before those events start, towards the end of the summer. So there'll be a set of rules which is really easy. It'll be around all of the events. It will be communicated to the England squash referees, and then everyone will know kind of what page everybody else is on, and then we can get some more consistency. But I think probably at the heart of it is going to be that kind of community spirit within UK-Racketball and Squash 57 events. And yeah, we're trying not to go down the route of being really harsh and having a huge number of rules that become really complicated.
Yeah, this is quite a hot topic, not just here, but I think when we're looking at it, the larger picture and Squash 57 going global, and we're getting a lot of questions coming through. Basic ones about the rules, and obviously doubles is one that's confusing a lot of people, because it's very different to squash doubles. But there's a lot of questions around the marking, and you and I, we talk about what should be the marker's decision in certain scenarios, and there's always going to be a grey area as you move the boundaries or the decision-making factors in one way or another. So it's not an easy one to solve for, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to get ahead of the game and make sure that we can be clear about what we think should be a let or a no let or a stroke. And we're running through a number of examples. We've had a couple of quizzes, and we've had one out this week, which is certainly split opinion as to whether it's a stroke or a let. And these are things that we're going to try and put clarity around, and that will then lead to updating the rules, because the rules would have inherited the world of squash, which is a more professional and a stricter world, and we're trying to make 57 more free-flowing, and that probably means simplifying the rules a little bit, so we don't just mirror what squash has done.
Definitely, yeah. The aim is going to be big rallies, very few decisions. And yeah, again, like Patrick said, free-flowing and kind of a really good game that everybody enjoys, rather than a strict set of rules with exact results.
Okay, so on that very positive sounding note, I think we should move on to the next question, which came from Jo Robinson, and she's asking, why Squash 57? Can we rebrand back to racquetball? And whenever I am online and posting stuff, I'm using Squash 57, and I invariably get some feedback saying, stop calling it 57, call it racquetball. And I can certainly appreciate where that's coming from. I was brought up with racquetball. I was, when those 20,000 people were polled by England Squash or World Squash Federation to determine what they should brand the game, somehow they came up with Squash 57, and I actually think the logo is pretty good. But the problem of calling UK-Racketball is that it's not the only racquetball that's out there. There is Australian racquetball, which is effectively American racquetball on a squash court. American racquetball is played on a larger court, and you use the ceiling, and you use like a power ball. It's super bouncy. And so if I was to go, and I have done this, if I speak to another country and ask and start talking about racquetball, they're going to be giving me totally different information or stats or knowledge about games that we don't even play here. And so having a unique a name for a game that is global is important when we're trying to sell this globally. I think we can call it whatever we like here, and people do, and because of historical reasons, they're going to call it racquetball. And certainly on the club I play at, it says and racquetball. And you'll see that all over the place. And at the events that we have here, people are saying racquetball. But if you were to say racquetball in America, you're probably getting nowhere. And the same in Australia. So I think, use what you like. No one's going to tell you to do one or the other. But depending on who you're speaking to, you might want to decide what term you're going to use. And you could say the same for a sport like football. Right? If you go to America and you start talking football, you're going to get in a very strange conversation because it's soccer over there, and it's soccer in most of the world. But we call it football, and that's sort of where it is. Mark, have you got any opinions or additional bits on this?
No, I think that's probably right, isn't it? I think there's conversations with England squash a few years ago now where we basically just decided that it didn't really matter what we kind of called it within the UK. And as Patrick makes the point, when we're selling this internationally, there's very good reasons for it to be called Squash 57 rather than racquetball. But within the UK at the moment, I think we're going for kind of this dual word, which is probably not ideal, but it is kind of where we're at with it. And I think, yeah, people just call it what you want. The most important thing is that people are on court and enjoying playing. So yeah, I think the events will probably have Squash 57 and racquetball included in those titles.
Yeah, I've even had it seriously suggested that out of America, not by anyone we interact with very often, that we should call it squash racquetball. And that was a very serious suggestion. So we can like or not like it, and in the UK we tend not to like it. But if we were to go, it's Squash 57 is a crap name, then I'd throw out pickleball. I don't think that's such a great name either, but that's taking over the world.
Yeah, but yeah, I think probably squash racquetball is not an overly terrible name. So yeah, probably the debate will continue. We'll see where we are in a few years. But for now, just call it what you want, and keep playing. Okay,
let's move on. So we had a question from Gavin Thomas, and Gavin's asking about the first service fault and why is it playable? Why isn't it just a fault and then you get a second serve? And this question could very well have come out of Malaysia as well, because they've gone down a slightly different route. But for those that aren't very familiar with the rules, when you serve your first serve, if the serve does not land in the receiver's box without hitting the back wall first, and assuming that it stays in play, so it hasn't hit the tin or gone above the outline, then that is a fault. But as the receiver, you have the option as to whether you want to play that fault or not. And so if the first serve is short, I can play that ball as the receiver, and the rally will continue. So the question is, why are you given that option? And in my mind, it's very hard in this game to serve an ace. It's very rare. I think Ted Geo will do it occasionally, but it's an unusual thing. So you're getting the ball in play, and if you do a bad serve, like a short serve, I think it deserves to be punished. So that's what I would. So that's, I guess, my reasoning why you have the option as the receiver to play that ball, and that is why the marker keeps quiet for that first serve, because they don't want to say fault if the receiver's trying to play the ball. They don't want to interrupt the game. So what's happened in Malaysia is they've taken the choice to just have one serve. They've decided they're only going to have one serve. And the reasoning for that, for them, is they have some personalities out there who will use the first serve as a time waster. So you've just had a long rally. They want to have a breather. They'll do a crappy first serve, which is unreturnable, or out of court, so that they can have a second serve. I think if they do a crappy serve like that, they should get punished for it, or they need better marking, one or the other. But that to me is why the first serve can be played and isn't just defaulting as a go to the second serve. I don't, Mark, if you have views on whether that's a rule that's worth looking into.
No, I mean, I think the rule works at the moment, doesn't it? And I think, yeah, if people are looking to use that as a break, then yeah, the idea that the receiver can just hit it and get them back into a rally is really good. So yeah, I like the rule as it is. I don't think we need to change it just yet.
I think if we were, in my mind, if I was to change a rule, I'd probably change the rule of the serve hitting the back wall before landing in the receiver's square. Because for me, what is that? In my mind, that's sort of a redundant rule. And you get to the question, well, was it a nick or wasn't it a nick? So if I was to change one, that would be it. But I like the idea of being able to play that first serve. Okay, let's move on. So the next question comes from Joe again, and she wants to know, what are the plans to promote Squash 57 when the courts open up later this year? And, you know, obviously, maybe not obviously, but the questions are geared to Mark a lot for what's going on in the UK, but this is a global question as well. You know, everyone's got this challenge at the moment. And certainly something we've been trying to do during the past year, when we haven't been on court very much, is to raise the profile of what's going on with our sport. So we've been had the opportunity to talk to the national bodies. So we addressed all countries. Every country that plays squash now has heard about Squash 57, and there's been some really positive feedback from that. And there's some. It's not just feedback, there's some action taking place. So maybe we'll be able to get into that in a little bit later on in this call. But we've certainly been trying to raise awareness of Squash 57 and getting it in front of people. So Mark, what are your thoughts about what's going to happen when the courts open up?
Yeah, so I think it is going to be a bit of a challenge. And yeah, I've had a few calls from kind of the clubs that I immediately deal with the series. And kind of chats with them about what they think, you know, will have happened to the market, and, you know, what percentage of people are going to be coming back and all of that. And I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot of clubs that are worried out there. And yeah, with people, it will be really interesting to see what happens. I think this is, yeah, probably a very important time for the sport, in terms of, you know, we really do need some action now to promote this game and to get it going. And I think we're probably risk, if nothing happens over the foreseeable future in the next kind of 5-10 years, that there's going to be a lot more facilities closing in the UK. So yeah, I think action really needs to be taken. The difficulty from a UK-Racketball perspective is that, you know, we are a really small organization. So, you know, it really is just me working on this. And I think, you know, sometimes the community does think that we kind of have much greater resources than we actually do. So running the events and kind of that top end has always been what we've been doing. Have got a plan that I've kind of taken to England Squash over what we could do to promote the game within the UK. It basically involves the creation of like a community of practice with linking the different clubs, coaches, stakeholders, committee members, even the racquetball enthusiasts within clubs. And then, you know, that ability to transfer skill sets between them. So, you know, showing individual clubs or coaches how they could market their sessions. Also kind of coaching tips on how to run bigger groups for Squash 57, because that is slightly different to squash. But kind of an overall kind of a view on how to do something from the ground up, really. I think it's really easy for national governing bodies to create toolkits or to create some video content and put that into the community and then hope that people pick it up. This would be much more of a kind of interaction between those coaches and clubs that are right on the ground and looking to build. And yeah, the creation of that community of practice, and then that build from the bottom rather than that, you know, trickle down from the top. Yeah. But at the moment, I think we are in limbo, and I don't know what the funding positions are for governing bodies or anything like that. So obviously Squash 57 Racquetball is completely tied to Squash's governing bodies. So we're, you know, very much waiting on them to kind of come to us. But we have plans in place that we'd kind of love to do. And yeah, I think, it's a really important question. I think this is going to be a very, very difficult time for our sport, and we really, do need to act, I think.
Yeah, it is a very difficult time. I think depending on which country you're in, what your expectations will be coming out of this pandemic may be very different. So here in the UK, 2019 was quite a good year, right? There were a lot of events. There was almost a monthly big tournament taking place, and they were all set out. I mean, I think you were always hitting your max on the availability of the courts and number of people. Whereas for other countries, it's going to be a relatively new sport, and we're seeing, from their perspective, their challenge may be different. We're trying to get back to where we were, and then move ahead. Like they're trying to get somewhere. So we're certainly seeing a lot of very positive news coming out. A lot's going on in South Africa, where I think there are small pockets of players, and now they're joining up the dots there and becoming a larger playing community. I'm hearing that Norway is going to have their first nationals, and they're lining that up for May this year, which is great news. So that's a country that's looking bigger picture. In Belgium, Belgium has seeded 40 of their clubs with equipment. So they've given them the rackets and the balls. It's slowed down a bit because they've also had to come off court. But the plan is that they will then have inter-club competitions, and they basically kick-started what's going on there, which is brilliant. In Canada, they're going to have a webinar at the beginning of April, a free webinar for all of the clubs that are in Canada to sell what's going on in Squash 57, to make them aware. And I think they're going to jump straight into having a plan for competitions going forward for 57. They see 57 as this game as being a real boost to the whole squash community. Clubs are going under because we can't fill the courts. They see this as a big possibilities ahead of them with this sport. So there's an awful lot that's going on out there, and Costa Rica is another one. They're keen to get involved. In Ecuador, they've got a monthly competition. So there's lots going on out there. So it's all very positive. And from a WSF standpoint, with Zena Wooldridge now in charge, they're re-looking at the bigger picture, which they have to, given the pandemic and a new president. So they're taking a bit of time to do that because there are many personalities involved. They have to work through the different regions and then down to the countries. But the expectation from the discussions I've had on the side on this is Squash 57 is going to be featuring far more heavily than it ever has in the past. There's got to be a more emphasis on fun, and that's a big piece of what I think we bring to the squash world, to the squash court world.
Yeah, and you kind of, what you're talking about there is the journey that England went on, and England squash went on back when it was England squash and racquetball, and you saw, this boost in popularity for racquetball, and the real good that it did for, so many of the country's squash clubs and squash community, where, not only extended the playing career of lots of people, but it brought kind of new people into the sport, families into the sport, and kind of, has that ability to attract really young kids, and, bring everyone in. And, we really did go down a route there. And, this became, as, obviously me and Patrick both started during that period, really big sport in the UK and a major part of England squash. And yeah, I think if other countries can start to do that, that will be absolutely fantastic, not just for them, but for, kind of that greater squash community.
Yeah, and some of this stuff is really basic. If I just look at the club that I play at, having Squash 57 there from a social booking standpoint, 30% of the bookings today are by Squash 57 only players. These are people who only play racquetball. They wouldn't be playing squash. And so that's effectively a 40% increase in booking revenues by just saying we play the game. So there's almost like a free revenue stream for clubs if they want to use it. Okay, let's move on. So the next question, or we got a set of questions coming in from Luke Bishop and Mark Thornley, and they're asking about how do we attract new players to play Squash 57. There's a dwindling number of squash players as a whole, and they came up with a number of different ideas. But I think underlying all this is a lot of the people who play racquetball today, they have entered this game through squash. They were part of the squash bubble, and they have aged like me, and they have now moved on to playing Squash 57, and they get a great deal of enjoyment out of it. But that has been the main pipeline into our sport, and as that pipeline constricts because there are fewer juniors playing squash, that's going to impact us as well. You know, we have a longer lifetime on the court, but we will get hit by that restricted pipeline. So the question, and Mark, I think you alluded to a little bit earlier, is what do we do to bring in new people, like laterally at an adult level or junior wise into our sport? And Mark and Luke had a number of suggestions about exhibitions and challenge matches and high profile events. So Mark, I'm sure you've been thinking about what can be done to expand the net to bring people onto the squash courts to play this game. So what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, so I think they make really good points, and yeah, as you said, kind of if you just attracting those squash players into racquetball, in Squash 57, then as that market contracts, we're going to be hit by that. And you know, ultimately, you know, people love playing squash, they love playing racquetball, and we want that to be, you know, there for more people, and we want more people to be able to enjoy it, and we want that to grow. I think in terms of tagging the racquetball and Squash 57 events alongside major championships, I think that's perfectly possible with exhibitions. I think what I wouldn't want to do was to try and make Squash 57 / racquetball another side to those championships and almost a poorer side to some of those championships. I think we have a different sport, and I think when we're talking about growing the community, the real importance is that we kind of embrace the idea that this is a different sport. This is, you know, for, you know, some people will be the same, they will be squash players, but also, you know, people who don't enjoy squash may well really enjoy Squash 57. And it's really important that for the clubs, they can attract different people. So it might be that, you know, players who really enjoy a longer workout. So, you know, in terms of calorie burning, with a squash match, you might have shorter rallies. In a Squash 57 match, you might have longer rallies, and some people just prefer that. The doubles aspect is obviously brilliant as well. Squash is a really difficult game to do with doubles, but Squash 57 with alternate shots is a brilliant game, and we've started to expand that with the racquetball series. So I think the clubs really need to, rather than looking to tag this onto squash, need to see this as a separate sport and see the advantages that it has as a separate sport. And then it can attract different people to the clubs, and then it can grow the total number of people rather than just trying to convert squash players into Squash 57 players. I mean, I personally think the only way to do that is the ground up. So I think exhibitions can be great, and I think like videos can be great, and I think there is a place for those. I think the issue that you've got is on kind of Instagram or YouTube, the people who are searching for those, the people that are seeing those are the people that already know the sport, who already enjoy it. And then you're just talking to your own bubble and you're struggling to grow the overall sport. So the only way to really do it is to go to the ground, it's to go to coaches in the different parts of the country and to go, right, how locally can you connect with people that at the moment either don't know that you exist or don't understand how much fun they will have if they come to one of your sessions.
Right. And I think on the UK-Racketball site, you have some really good case studies of clubs that have gone out of their way to do that. And you know, I think we produced some sort of cheat sheet to try and prompt ideas.
Yeah, there's something like 40 pages on the UK-Racketball website. If you go into the development section, you'll be able to see them, their case books. There's also kind of data on, the great advantages to racquetball/squash 57 in terms of life expectancy, mobility, and community. So yeah, I'd access all of those resources. But I think, as I alluded to earlier, I think the real thing we need to do is to bring all the coaches together. And as Patrick said, there's some great case studies there of coaches that have been proactive and have built their little communities. And we need to get it so that they can communicate to those coaches who at the moment aren't either embracing Squash 57 or would really love to do it and are just not sure how to get those sessions off the ground. And if we can build a community of practice with all of them, I think that could be fantastic for the community and get the word out and get loads more people playing.
Yeah, so this is clearly a very important question, and it's not going to get solved by an individual or by one regulatory body. Or this is something that really requires everybody to get involved and out there and selling the game that we love. That's the only way I think that we'll actually make those really meaningful inroads. As Mark's saying, if we try to tag on to existing squash high profile events, then we'll always be the poor cousin. And so it may get a bit more visibility, but the visibility will be within the squash world that already has that visibility. So we're not really expanding the range of people or the diversity of people that we're looking to get into this sport. And diversity is another big point that's out there, and inclusivity, and these are things that we also need to look at, and Mark and I have been discussing this over the last week or so around what we can do, and we've got a couple of ideas for maybe the nationals later on this year in the UK, but this is part of a working group discussion that's global, and the thoughts about what we can do to be more inclusive, and hopefully we can make some serious inroads there as well.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it is at the moment this is very much a working, something we're working on, and the point that you made there about it's not up to one national government body, whether it's WSF or England Squash or those organisations like UK-Racketball. I think the only way that we can do this is with the whole community working together. So it's got to be about grassroots coaching, and it's got to be about the clubs as well and those racquetball enthusiasts. And if we can kind of build something where we're all working together, that's I think the best hope for a really, really good future.
Okay. Luke had a sort of a follow-up suggestion, and that was around showcasing Squash 57. So maybe producing a basic promotion, or we have a basic promotion video that we've managed to have translations of subtitles for, and that's out there, and that's something that you did alongside England Squash, and that's gone down really well. It's one of our most viewed videos that we have on our Squash 57 YouTube channel, which is a very new channel. I think we feel sometimes that these have been out there a long time. That and the Squash 57 Facebook page, they haven't been out there very long, and they've got many hundreds of people, either members or viewing on a regular basis, which is great. But I think Luke's saying, what can we do to step up more productions like that, and getting more useful video material online.
So yeah, I think Lou mentioned that documentary. I mean, I really like the idea. I think it's brilliant. I'd love it if we kind of had a budget to do it, and I think that definitely needs to be an aspiration. That is something that when we're in a position to do it, I think we should do it, because I think it could be really, really good. And I think the racquetball story is really interesting, how quickly it's grown and the position it's in. And I think people kind of do forget that, and I think that could be really powerful. I think at the moment, kind of with the budget that we have and with the position we're in, what my aims are for this year is that events, especially like the nationals, that we're going to have much more like professional photographers around. Not just to capture the sport itself, but to capture the atmosphere of the event. Last year at the end of the Nationals, we did kind of a mini promotional video, which kind of, had bits from the Halls of Fame and the different title holders, as well as clips from, kind of different matches. I think that, again, is something I'd like to do a much more professional job on this year. And as Luke says, I think if we, at the moment, it's probably small steps, but I think kind of more professional photography, better quality promotional videos around those events would be really, really good. And yeah, if we can kind of keep everything building and work towards that kind of documentary and bigger promotional videos in the future, I think that'd be really, really good.
Yeah, I think Luke and Mark together came back with a lot of great ideas, and for those that don't know, Luke is the Scuzzer person. He did the Scuzzer video, so you can check him out there. Those were all the questions that we had sent in by the deadline, but I have a couple of more that have come in since then, so I'm going to put Mark on the spot with these. So the first one that came in is about rankings. So in the UK, we have the UK-Racketball ranking, which is a year-to-date ranking, and you accumulate points throughout the year, and then at the end of the year there's a finals, and we have awards, right? That's the UK Racketball rankings. And we also have a national rankings, which is a rolling 365-day rankings that go towards a lot of the seedings for competitions. So a question that came out, or wasn't directed at this session, but was in Facebook, was what's going to happen to the rankings, because the 365 has rolled off and we're all going to be the same ranking. Is that what's going to happen? And what are your thoughts on where that might go?
Yeah, so obviously at the moment everything's just been frozen on the website, so we haven't produced an update on the rankings. I think we're probably going to wait, and once we have a really good idea of when those events are going to start, a couple of months kind of before it, we're going to work out exactly what we're going to do. To be honest, what I'm going to do is probably copy PSA. So Professional Squash Association is their ranking system is kind of what formed the UK-Racketball ranking system right at the very beginning. So the idea they have their Super Series and then they also have their world rankings. That's, the take that we've got as well. They are at the moment just working out exactly what they're doing with those kind of ranking suspensions and freezing and everything like that. I think I'm in a position where I can just wait, see what they do, see whether it works, and then hopefully it works and we can do something very, very similar.
Yeah, I think it was sort of a fun type question that was out there, because there are some people who will, well, not some people, maybe one person who's #1 ranked, and they're wondering, God, have I lost it? Or maybe I still am. Maybe I'm #1 still.
Well, they've been #1 for a long time, haven't they? So they've got, some really good stats on number of months of England #1. That's fantastic. So, yeah, we'll wait and see. I think the Nationals this year is going to have to be a case of us sitting down, and probably more subjective than it has been in previous years. So yeah, we're going to have to use the rankings. We're going to have to, use some historic data as well to work out where to see people and everything like that.
Yeah. Okay, and one final question. Actually, this question was posted online today by Paul Dodds, and he was asking what balls are going to get used in England this year, because it looks like England Squash have just announced a Dunlop deal for 4 years, and I think when these deals get made, they're very much focused on the squash world, and he's asking what balls are we going to be using. And I'm not going to put Mark necessarily on the spot for this unless he wants to talk to it, but I'm going to respond to that question in Facebook with a little bit more detail, because balls is a big question that's out there, and it is the reason that I joined the WSF Squash57 Commission. It has received attention ever since then, and in a survey that we ran maybe 2 years ago, this was the #1 issue that was in the world of Squash 57, the variety of balls that are out there and how they do not meet the specifications, or cannot be meeting the specifications, because they all bounce differently. And some, even for the same brand and color, don't always bounce the same. So it is something that we are addressing. And in fact, there's a whole batch of balls that are being sent off to a third-party testing laboratory this week to be tested. And hopefully we're just about to make some significant announcements around the balls. It's not going to be anything earth-shattering, but it's going to be level setting and make life easier for people. But I don't know, Mark, if you want to respond to Paul, or just say it'll be a surprise.
So yeah, I just want to say I know you've been working really hard on it, and yeah, it's one of those where I do think it's important for the community, and especially for events. Obviously, it's one where, you know, it's a nightmare if people have been practicing with a different ball and then turn up to kind of a national championships, and this is, you know, they're using a different ball and it's not the same. And I think, yeah, all I'd like to say is we'll try and get an answer on exactly what we're doing with the UK-Racketball series and the nationals as soon as we can. Make sure that everybody knows, yeah, kind of what balls we're using and the plan going forward. I think as long as we have a clear plan, like you said, with clear parameters, then hopefully everything will be really good.
Yeah. Okay, so those are all the questions we've had come in. I'd like to thank everybody for sending them in. Hopefully we didn't miss too many, but I hope that's also that this is a useful Q&A type event, and if so, then maybe we'll be repeating it in the future. Thank you very much for your time. You're obviously very busy, and I don't mean that flippantly. You are very busy. You are at university doing a lot of stuff right now, much more than maybe people understand. So thank you very much for your time.
No problem. But yeah, I think this, yeah, like we've talked about throughout this, it's about a community build. So I think, yeah, we'll kind of see how this goes down, and then, you know, hopefully maybe in 6 months we could have something similar. And then obviously, again, feel free to send all your questions in. We'll answer every single one of them, and yeah, get those answers to you, because we know kind of how much you care about your sport, and, you know, how committed you are to its future as well. So, you know, we are, and yeah, we're very much wanting to build this kind of with everyone.
Okay, thank you very much.